Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to June on the Range, a BookTube event created by Michael K. Vaughan last year, designed to celebrate Westerns, the reading of Western fiction, short fiction, novels, very long novels, trash, really good stuff, all the spectrum of Western stuff. I had a blast last year. Everybody that did June on the Range last year had a blast. That's how you know a successful BookTube event. When it's not the number of people who were involved, it's that they all loved it and marked it on their calendars for next year. And I did. I definitely did. I took a chance that in the intervening year, Michael K. Vaughan and I would not have a screaming hissy fit and no longer be talking. June 23 came around, and by random chance, that happened to be true. It helps, I think, to prevent that from happening. I have always said that it helps if the other person gets your sense of humor. It very much helps that on Mike's channel, he has often looked at the camera and simply said, well, Steve's a nice guy, but you got to understand, he's wrong about everything. And on my channel, I have looked at the camera and said, yeah, I love Michael K. Vaughan's channel as much as the rest of you do, but he's wrong about everything. That helps a lot. So I am a host again for June on the Range 2023, and I've been having a ball, as usual. And because I was looking forward to it, because I marked it on my calendar, I accumulated Westerns. Ratty old Western paperbacks of the type. I didn't go for the classics. I grabbed the type of totally disposable trash that people bought by the buckets 70 years ago when Westerns were in their heyday. And I just set them aside. I didn't read them. I just set them aside. And I've been reading a lot of those for June on the Range. I'm gonna finish out the year, finish out the month of June by reading ebooks. They're more convenient for me. I like to do most of my reading on a tablet, on a slate of metal and glass, instead of wrestling with stinky old paperbacks that are going to fall apart on me, as two of them did. Just this June, two of them literally fell apart on me. So I went to my ebook library of Westerns. But just because I was switching to ebooks doesn't mean I was switching completely gears in what I was reading. I went back to an author that I've already read this June on the Range. The author is William MacLeod Rain, who was born in London but grew up on the Texas-Arkansas border. He moved to the wilds of Texas when he was a little kid, so he probably didn't have many memories of London, and lots and lots of memories of a West at the time that he was there that was fading. I know that the West is perpetually in the act of fading, but it was a whole bunch of aspects of the Old West that you can find in old Western novels still existed in an unbroken continuity when he was growing up on the Texas border. And he could tell, much like many other connoisseurs have been able to tell, that it wasn't going to last forever and that he should soak it up and maybe immortalize it. He went to school, went to college, worked for the pulps, worked extensively for the pulps, which those of you who are watching June on the Range, if you're watching an event created by Michael K. Vaughan, you probably know what the pulps are, since he's the pulps #1 champion on BookTube. But they were cheap magazines. There were a million of them. You're probably familiar with the two or three really famous ones, but there were a million of them. And they paid. So writers went to them, and they gave the readers exactly what readers wanted, so you got tons of fantasy novels, two-fisted adventure novels, biplane adventure novels, and Westerns. And William Rain went to the pulps and wrote a ton of stuff for them. I don't think we will ever definitively know how much this guy wrote. Hundreds of novels, probably thousands of short stories, probably used pseudonyms. We'll probably never know. Because one thing that I've been discovering on June in the Range is that a lot of these guys have never had any kind of critical attention. Which just boggles my mind. That just boggles my mind. That there can be a Penguin classic of the Mysteries of Paris, but these guys that sold books by the bucket load have never had even, as far as I can tell, a lot of the people that I'm reading have never even had a biographical article written about them, much less a whole biography. In a lot of cases, the authors that I'm reading who sold huge amounts of books and had fascinating lives. If you've written 1,000 books under 5 pseudonyms, you have a life fascinating enough for me to read about. But the lives aren't out there. The biographies are not there. In a lot of cases, I get the strong impression that there are papers, that there is, I guess you could call it an authorial library, that just sits somewhere, in the basement of Oberlin College. In the case of William Rain, I bet he went to Oberlin. I bet that's where his papers are, or somewhere else. that just sit there and no one ever consults them, no one ever thinks about them. That seems to me to be a terrible waste. But anyway, I went back to William McLeod Rain. I read OU Text. Now, this ebook has the comma in the wrong place. This was a popular thing to say a century ago, OU and then whatever, OU kid or whatever. And the comma goes after O. So that's just a typo here for this ebook. It should be OU Text. Isabella Stewart Gardner, of course, famously said over a century ago, OU Sox, meaning the Red Sox. And she did that, and they won the World Series. And then they went a century without winning the World Series and were under the curse of the Bambino until finally they made the requisite offerings to the requisite gods and won the World Series again in my lifetime, which was something. But for many, many years at baseball season here in Boston, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum had a banner made up that they would put on the fence of the museum saying, OU Sox. It was a common thing to say. It's totally dated now. It dates this book. But there's a lot of other things that date this book as well. Not as many as you would think. I like William Rain as a Western writer. I've now read 2 books by him, and I like him. And there's a lot of other books. So I'm glad that I like him because there's a lot of other things to read. And this one is about, it fills a pattern. I mean, the Texas Rangers, this takes place in Texas, on the Texas border. Area, atmosphere, men, women, weather, contact with First Nation people. All of that is a world that William Rain knew firsthand. And this is said earlier than the version of the world that he knew, but it hadn't changed. So it has an aura here of verisimilitude that is very much missing from a lot of Westerns. And yet, William Rain can give you that verisimilitude, that authority with one hand, and take it away with the other by writing in the most ham-handed, pulpy way imaginable. It's so, I have to believe it's so tongue-in-cheek that I don't take offense to it. It's over the top. So many different ways. The characters talk like roadside cod Shakespeare bit players, but you don't mind. You don't, somehow or other, when this author does it, you don't mind. Now, I'm not kissing up to Michael K. Vaughan here, but I'm going to attribute all of that companionability and readability to this author's learning his chops in the pulp world. Because that's what readers wanted. Pulp writers are some of the best writers in terms of turning pages, in terms of actually hooking you and keeping you reading, in terms, in other words, of entertaining you. They're some of the best ones out there. Again, where, I don't mean to turn this into one long diatribe about books that Steve has not seen, but where is the big book on the pulp era? Where is the 800-page, very readable book on the pulp era? Not the gigantic pulps. This guy wrote for the big pulps, but he also wrote for all the small ones too. Where is the big 800-page book on the pulps as a phenomenon and as an era in publishing and writing in American letters? If there is such a book and I've missed it, please tell me. But I don't, in the last 30 years, I have not seen one. And why should there be only one? It'd be nice if this were given the critical attention that it is due. It was a genuine phenomenon. It deserves more attention than it has. But anyway, this is the story of a young man. There are Texas Rangers who ride all around this book, including one in particular, who's a very standout character. The book's other main character. But mainly, this is the story of a young man named Tex. And Rain writes about him. He writes about him in exactly the way that you would think. Here, let's get one description here. Let me fumble around with the paperback and make sure that I have the right turn down. Oh, wait, no, I don't have to do that. I can just ask the machine to take me to my annotations, would you please? So much nicer. Anyway, this is our description of our main character to start with. Why should he not dance? He was 21, stood 5'11" in his socks, and weighed 170 pounds of bone, sinew, and well-packed muscle. A son of blue skies and wide, wind-swept places, he'd never been ill in his life. Wherefore the sun-kissed world looked good to him. So not only does he have sinews, which certainly you have to write about sinews if you write for the pulps, but also there's a wherefore tossed in there. There's a wherefore just unceremoniously tossed into that description. You won't get many Western writers who toss in wherefores, but this guy does. And he does it so convincingly that I don't mind at all. And it's make or break action. We follow Tex. It's basically a Bildungsroman, unlike so many of the Westerns that I've been reading this year. But we follow him. He goes through all sorts of vicissitudes. He doffs his hat to a pretty filly. He has all sorts of adventures, and they never let up. And I don't know the actual genesis of this book, and maybe nobody does now. Again, I don't want to rant, but why is this stuff so unstudied? But I don't know if this originated in the pulps. I don't know if this originated serially. It certainly reads like it did. But whether it does or not, whether it did or not, William Rain understands that if you're going to write a Western like this about a well-built, pretty, brainless nobody, you'd better keep the action bubbling at a steady pace the whole time. That was sort of the rule of the pulps anyway. No matter what you were reading, whether it was Gothic or mystery or men's adventure or science fiction or fantasy, no matter what, you had to keep the pace up. And that happens in this book. It was just absolutely delightful. I loved it. So I may very well read another William Rain before June on the Range 2023 is out. June on the Range 2023 only has a little bit more than a week to go. Today is Juneteenth. To all of you who celebrate, and if you're American, you should celebrate at Juneteenth. Everything's closed. It's a federal holiday. There's no mail. The post office is not open. That sort of thing. Subway's still running. Retail stores are still open. But today is to celebrate the other Independence Day. The country celebrates its Independence Day on July the 4th, but this is the other Independence Day, because when July the 4th was celebrated for Independence Day, a third of the people in the country, or 100,000 people, weren't free. They were slaves. This is the first year in my life where Juneteenth is being celebrated, but no one is allowed to use the word slave. Instead, it's become enslaved person. So for the first time ever, Juneteenth is being celebrated in a country where no one can say the word slave. But nevertheless, if you're an American, you should celebrate today. Don't grouse because the post office isn't open. Instead, have yourself a nice meal. Sit back and smile. Today is the day when chattel slavery was eliminated, when all of the slaves that were declared free by the Emancipation Proclamation and other proclamations were actually free. A lot of work still to go after that. A lot of work still to go now. But why was I bringing up June? Oh, right, Juneteenth, because that signals, among other things, in addition to signaling the end of slavery, it also signals the end of slavery in America, I should point out. Again, I don't mean I'm digressing all over the place in this video. I should point out the end of slavery in America. There are more chattel slaves in the world right now than there were in the 1860s. Just so you know. And your hands aren't clean, and neither are mine. There are items in this video that were made by slaves. And I might not know that, its chain of provenance completely, but I can be pretty sure that that's true. And the same is true with you. The device that I'm filming this on. The device that I'm showing you this book on. Half the things around you. The world today is full of slavery. We should keep that in mind as well. Not everyone is free. But the reason I was mentioning Juneteenth was not to rant about slavery, but rather to point out that it also signals that June doesn't have much time left in it. June has a little more than 10 days left in it. So I'm going to have to start picking and choosing. I'm not going to keep reading a Western every night when June on the Range is over. So I think I will indulge in another William Rain, but maybe one more. Maybe only one more. I've got a lot of other ground to cover, a lot of other authors that I haven't encountered. But I think I'll be doing the rest of the month on ebooks. So I'll wrap this up with many, many digressions, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.